So this happened today, and it's so incredibly strange. I really don't even know what to think of it. I'll give you a little background. I live in a city where hearing gunshots off in the distance is pretty common, and a majority of the population is on government assistance. I moved here about 3 years ago to get sober, got a job close by, and found a dirt cheap, cozy little 2-bedroom apartment. Now the setup is a lot like a split-level house, which my pervert landlord also lives in. My landlord has always been super fucking creepy. He has a wife and like 6 kids, 3 of which live in the same house. When I first moved in, he asked me to lunch, where he hit on me the entire time and told me that he likes to keep his business tenants away from his family because they don't need to be bothered with anything, and so to keep this just between me and him. Now I'm sure you can see where this is going. He asked me if I want to get out of here, go to a Cecil hotel to have raunchy sex, to which I very politely declined and told him that our relationship is to be strictly professional. I was pretty sure at this point that he was going to drag me into an alley and rape me and kill me, but I'm still here, so... Now, let's fast forward to today. Getting home from work. Normally, first order of business is change out of my work clothes. This is the part where all the perverts come to drool, so this is why I've created a throwaway account. But what the fuck ever. This is so fucking unnerving, I had to share it. So anyway, I'm changing out of my work clothes and decide to put on some comfy cotton panties, which I never wear. They're kind of stuffed way down at the bottom of the drawer. I reach down into the drawer and pull out the first pair. Dirty? What? I say to myself. Is that glitter? Well, that's super fucking weird. What the fuck? I throw them in the hamper and pull out the next pair. Fucking glitter. What the fuck? Next pair. Glitter. Next pair. Same. 5 pairs of cotton panties later, all fucking glitter. Now, to paint this picture a little more vividly, the glitter is just in the crotch area. There is literally no glitter anywhere else on the panties, or in the drawers, or in any of the other 16 pairs of panties in that same drawer. Also, let's get one thing straight. I'm not a stripper. I don't wear anything glitter. No glitter lotion, no glitter deodorant, no glitter tampons, no glitter clothes. These panties were folded up, stuffed in a drawer, which had no other remnant of any sort of glitter anywhere else except in the crotch area of 5 very specific pairs of folded panties. What the actual fuck? Needless to say, I am knocking the fuck out of this place as soon as humanly possible. Edit. As reality is setting back in, moving quickly is a seemingly less viable option. Plus, I think a little more time to catch him in the act would be very helpful for when I finally call the police. Me and my best friend visited London last year. Using our map of the city we got from the local hotel, we were finding our way to various touristy attractions, either by walking or taking the tube. It was getting dark and we wanted to see Trafalgar Square. We looked at the map and saw it was only a few blocks away, so we decided to walk. So we walked through the crowded London street, trying not to get separated in the sea of Londoners and other tourists. After a particularly large group of people walked by us, I felt someone behind me. Through my peripheral vision, I saw a person behind us, walking directly between me and my friend, keeping pace with us. I couldn't tell who it was, but all I knew was they were tall. Now, there were dozens of people around us walking in the same direction we were. But what was off about this person was how close they were to us. To an onlooker, it would have looked like the three of us were walking together. We stop at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The stranger stands behind us, much too close. Me and my friend are looking straight forward. I could tell by her posture that she also noticed this person behind us. The light changes and we both cross the street, walking as fast as we can, trying to put some distance between us and this stranger. I turn my head, pretending to look at the cars so I can catch a glimpse of this person. It was a very tall woman in a long black jacket. This is perhaps naive of me, but the fact that it was a woman made me feel a little more at ease. That, and when we reached the other side of the street, she was a fair distance behind us. I thought with relief that I was just being paranoid. She wasn't following us. As soon as this thought entered my head, I felt her behind us once again. We walked in utter silence the rest of the way. I was panicking. I'm still a rigid mess when we finally reached Trafalgar Square. Then the woman behind us finally speaks, startling me and my friend, and says, "Thanks for letting me walk with you girls." She smiles kindly and walks away. My friend and I stare at each other completely dumbfounded. In case this wasn't common sense, if you decide to walk with people you don't know for safety, freaking tell them. In summer 2012, my boyfriend and I went to a beach close to us in coastal New England. It was the evening, and we walked on the beach for a while, walked through the arcade and boardwalk, and decided to go for a drive up the coast. As it was early August, it was an extremely humid, foggy night. We pulled off on one of those small parking lots that dot the coastal road. It was around 10 p.m., and no one was parked there, so we thought it wouldn't be terrible. We made our way to the back seat and fooled around for a while. We did not have sex, because we were already too paranoid to do that, in case we were caught. No charges of semi-public nudity for us. We had finished our fun and we were relaxing, basking in the romantic afterglow. I had my head resting on my boyfriend's chest, shoulder, when I looked up to kiss him on the cheek. In the edge of the fogged-up window, I saw a face staring intently at us, pressed up against the glass. I screamed. My boyfriend turned his head in the direction, saw the face, and did a bit of a scream himself. We saw the figure run away from the car, over the sand dune, and onto the beach. I felt terrified and immediately violated, and decided in that moment I probably would never be the same. Not true, but in the moment it was quite scary. In a rush of adrenaline, my boyfriend wanted to chase after him and yelled, "I'll get you, motherfucker," into the dark. I pleaded with him to get back in the car, not to do anything rash, and to lock the doors, and go find a police station. We asked a man who had recently pulled into that same small parking lot sometime during our rendezvous, probably for some night fishing, if he had seen anyone run onto the beach. He had, but couldn't tell where he would have gone then. We drove to the nearest police station and just filed a report that some random man was either purposely peeping into the cars of strangers to scare them or to get some kicks. They said they'll let the patrol know. Perhaps it was a rascally teenager, or perhaps it was someone with worse intentions. We drove home in the fog, very shaken, and I was convinced there must have been some way he could have been videotaping us, because his face seemed to have a halo of artificial light around it, but I'm sure he wasn't. It would have been hard to see anything. We haven't parked and fooled around anywhere since. Now, I only put these pieces together recently, and as soon as I realized what happened, chills ran up my spine. I was about 5 to 7 years old. I remembered my room was a nice shade of blue, and I had a loft bed. For those who don't know, that's a bunk bed, except it was only a top bunk. I didn't really think twice about it, but I used to change in my bed, getting entirely nude, something I saw no problem with. This one particular time, my stepdad was in the backyard mowing the lawn, or whatever else needed tending to. There was a window to the backyard that allowed a view of the upper part of my bedroom, which also meant that you could see the top of my loft bed easily. The window wasn't terribly high. You'd only need a stepladder to reach it easily, if you were of average height. Essentially, I was dressing and undressing in front of a window. My stepdad saw me and came inside, told me I had to get dressed on the ground so I couldn't be seen. A little while later, I'm at home alone. Since I was well behaved and my older sibling was at least 10, there wasn't any issue with it, since it was only for a little while. The phone rings, I don't know the number, and I remember being told not to answer 1-800 numbers. But that's not what this was. I pick up the phone and say, "Hello? Hello, are your parents home?" I immediately remember being told never to say I was home alone or without parental guidance. So I responded saying my dad was in the shower and that he just went in. The person on the other end hung up. A few months later, I have a memory of being in my room and looking to the window to see a face. This, of course, scared the ever-loving fuck out of me. I went running to my parents. At the time, we had at least 3 feet of snow. Initially, as any parents do, they shrugged it off and told me to go to bed. You've probably put this together already, but there were footprints outside my window. I was told that on my block there were incidents where boys were caught peeping into windows. Our bathroom also had a window. Weird, I know. And trying to see naked women or ladies or whatever. And it was apparently some neighborhood boys causing trouble. Fast forward, and I'm about 12 when my repressed memories surface. I won't go into details, but a babysitter we had that lived on the block did something very bad to my sister and I only have one memory of it. She, unfortunately, has more. He was about 15 to 16 when it happened, and went unreported for some time, due to neither my sister nor I remembering it. Oh yeah, he was also our cousin, who happened to live only a few houses away from us. So, incestual cousin, overall pervert, Derek, let's not meet again. Edit. I got a few questions asking me to make this clearer. Derek was the boy standing outside my window. This story happened when I was 18 in Alaska. I'm now a petite woman, now in my 20s. Some friends and I wanted to take a road trip to visit another friend, Adam, after he had moved to another town in Alaska. And it was also 4th of July weekend, so we had brought a ton of fireworks and booze. There were 4 of us, including myself, going to visit Adam, a girl, Jess, and 2 of our big guy friends, John and Chad. It was about a 4-hour car ride. We got into town around 8 p.m. or so when we arrived, we were super eager to stretch our legs and to find somewhere to hunker down for the next 2 days, where we could drink and hang out. All the hotels in this town were booked, because it's a tourist attraction of a town, and the middle of summer. We decided on an already very packed campground. We get our tent set up, and decided to start cracking open our beers and smoking. You know, teen stuff. Hours pass, and we start to get really wasted and loud, and wanting to explore because we've never been to this town before. So we're walking around being loud and having the time of our lives, meeting locals and other campgoers. We meet a group of 6 guys and 2 girls, and invited them to our camp to hang out and drink and shoot off our fireworks. One of the guys is with the group, but it seems as if they don't know each other. He isn't talking with any of them or really even looking at them. But he tags along anyway. He sits next to the fire with me and he's just incredibly friendly, very interested in talking to me, mind you. And he told me he went by the name Happy. He told me he was in his mid-30s, but he was very handsome. But as nice as he was, he just seemed odd. A little flattering, but really weird because he wouldn't leave my side and just kept staring into my eyes. But his looked blank. Something about his eagerness to speak with me made me feel uneasy. He was telling me about how he was a doctor from a small village here in Alaska, with a name I'm 98% sure was made up. And when I brought that up, asking where it was, he just kept telling me, "Small one, I'm sure you've never heard of," and laughed it off. We then got on to the topic of traveling, and told him that I've only left Alaska once, but I've been to a lot of villages and towns within the state. He started on saying how he would love to take me somewhere to travel because he made really good money with his job and he would love to explore a new place with a new friend. I declined and kinda shrugged him off for a while, ignoring him, while Jess and I danced around the fire. So probably an hour or 2 goes by, and the group he was with left, but he stayed. We thought, whatever, if he's still down to party, why not? But at this point, I'm slightly trying to avoid being his center of attention. He invites us to take a walk with him through the woods to see this river. Our 3 guy friends thought Happy was weird and didn't like that he was hanging all over me. And I was a little creeped out too. Although Jess and I thought it would be fun to go on a drunken adventure, and luckily, our friends refused to let us leave with the guy alone. So our friends are walking ahead of us a little ways, peering back every so often, and Jess and I are lagging wildly and talking, while the guy just kinda walks next to us, except he keeps veering in front of me and trying to touch my hand. Jess realizes and she and I keep looking at each other like, the hell, man? and at one point, he brushed my hair behind my ears. I wasn't having it. I asked him politely to please not do that. He then asked me, "Why? You have a pretty face," and tried to grab at my hand again. We motioned to our friends in front of us and quietly let them know what was up. So John walked next to us, and he was a really big guy, height and weight-wise. John strikes up a conversation with the guy. Jess and I were still really wasted, and we were very vocal at that point about the guy being a weirdo, so I yelled, "This guy is weird, we should run." We also yelled to our friends we would meet them back at the tents. We were running for about 5 minutes, and we see the river that he wanted to bring us to. So we dart over there, and there's a small bank, so we would have to jump down to get to the water. Jess jumps down first. I had one leg up, about to leap down, when I heard a rush of branches behind me and felt 2 hands grab around my waist and lift me up. I turned around to see the guy's face buried into my neck, and he's laughing and asked me, "Where did you think you were going, Bunny?" And before I could yell, I see my friend John right on this dude's ass, hauling butt through the trees to us. He grabs a hold of the guy and is cussing at him and pushed him onto the ground. I didn't see much more because next thing I knew, Jess has a hold of my hand and we're running back to camp with Chad and Adam. We get back, and we all hop in one of the tents, and we're freaking out as I recap what happened, and telling them he called me Bunny, and I had no idea what it meant. John comes back about 15 minutes behind us, and I ask him what happened after Jess and I took off the first time. And he says Happy and him were talking when they saw us take off into the trees, and Happy looked to him and asked, "Aren't they cute? Like rabbits? Rabbits that want to chase." And he darted after us. And again, John is a big guy, probably about 385 in weight, so I'm sure Happy wasn't expecting him to haul ass after him. But I am forever thankful that he did, and saved me from enduring whatever the guy had in mind. We ended up leaving town the next day. Instead of spending our 2 days, we spent 1 night. And that was definitely enough excitement for all of us. Also, campground weirdo and doctor, let's not meet again. I had forgotten about this incident until something randomly jogged my memory recently. About 10 years ago, I got a job at a 24-hour gas station while I started college full-time. I was 18, female, and uneasy about working alone initially, but I got used to it, and the regular customers that hung out made me feel pretty safe. They stuck me on second shift usually. We could really only afford 1 cashier, as there was a larger, more popular station right next to us. It could get lonely sometimes too. After I had been working there a few months, I was working a particularly slow, wintry shift when the phone rang around 10 p.m. "Favorite Mark, this is Jay Decide 37. The phone very rarely rang. I expected it to be my manager. "Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm a student at the university." The voice was clearly a man attempting to sound like a woman. I humored her, figuring I wasn't one to judge. "I'm in a graduate program pertaining to child psychology. I was wondering if you could take part in an anonymous survey for my thesis." This was new, but I looked around at the empty store and thought, what the hell? Sure thing, but if I have any customers, I'll have to put you on hold. Oh, great. Now, to start off, do you have any children? Nope. Do you have any young children in your immediate family? 2 nephews, 7 and 9. Oh. This was an exaggerated ooh, very breathy. Do you ever babysit them? Occasionally. I was still taking this seriously. Being young and naive, I saw no immediate red flags. Do you discipline them when you watch them? Lisa's voice was lowering now, like she was a little distracted. I put them in timeout. I was now a little wary. This turn in topic had caught my attention, and I felt the need to hold back on my answers. Do you ever spank them? I was catching on, but a part of me wanted to believe this person was telling the truth because otherwise it was a little far out. I usually leave that up to the parents. Do they spank them? Hard? I dunno. So their parents spank them. Don't you want to spank them though? What? When they're being bad little boys, don't you want to bend them over your knee and just slap the shit out of them? Lisa had trouble getting that last sentence out, as her breathing was labored and rapid. I could now hear the rhythmic slapping sounds that confirmed my slightly delayed suspicions. What the fuck? My shock kept me from slamming the phone. The voice on the other end suddenly changed to a low growl. Come on, Jadeside37. Tell me how you spanked your nephews and like it. The use of my name snapped me out of it. I disgustedly threw the phone down on the receiver and immediately looked toward the giant glass door entrance to the store. Through the glare, I struggled to see if anyone might be lingering near the empty parking lot. I ran towards the doors and locked them, still scanning my surroundings. I didn't open them again until my boyfriend came to sit with me. I soon forgot about it, chalking it up to some random creeper. 2 years later, I worked for the same chain but was now the manager of a different store. I had a cushy day shift, but one day my night shift employee had an emergency, and I found myself alone in the empty store around midnight. The phone rang. Favorite Mark, this is Jadeside37. Hello again, Jadeside37. A voice, familiar but not quite recognizable from one sentence. Who is this? Lisa. I have some questions you never answered. Immediately I remembered every bit of our first encounter. I ran to lock both sets of doors without hesitation. You sick fuck. Don't ever call me again. As I locked the last door, I glanced outside, and in the distance, I could see a single 4-door car parked in the shadows at a strip mall down the road. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like someone was in it, moving around. Before I hung up, I heard Lisa's male personality grunting. You're no fun, Jadeside37. And then I saw that car pull out onto the street with its headlights off. So I ran to the back office, which had no windows and contained the security monitors. I called on emergency, and a female officer said they would send a car. Then I called that same boyfriend and told him Lisa had called again. When I told him about the car I had seen, he got right out of bed and got there before the cops. I could see him arrive from the monitors, and he waited in the office with me. 30 minutes later, a cop car pulled into the lot, circled the building, and drove right back out. I decided right then and there that I was closing until morning. I caught hell from the home office, but when I explained the situation, they urged me to file a report and allowed me to keep closing for night shift until my regular ex-security guard male employee could return. I left the station a few months later after getting my CNA license. I never heard from Lisa again, but I still wonder what their true intentions were, and if they were just watching me for 2 years, as my new station wasn't far from the old one, and some of my regulars had switched when I moved. Then again, maybe Lisa just got her kicks from calling and stalking random gas stations, and she had luckily stumbled upon me 2 years later that night. Either way, Lisa, I really hope we never meet, if we haven't already. First of all, I want to say that I'm Lithuanian, so my grammar will not be perfect by any means. So this happened like 4 years back. I am now 19, soon to be 20, but I still get chills whenever I think about what happened that particular day. I live in a medium-sized, for our country, city, where about 70 to 80,000 people live, and at the time I was living in almost city center. I took about 3 to 5 minutes to walk to the main part of our city, where every weekend a lot of people come to take a walk, just chill or to drink. Every September our city holds a festival to name the birth of the city, and it usually takes place all weekend long. And you can already tell that a lot of people, especially teens, come and spend their evening drinking and just running the atmosphere of the whole festival. At the time, I was 15 to 16 years old, and that was my first time going to that huge concert with my friends, not with my parents anymore. I was so pumped, like I felt almost a grown-up person. Parents told me to get home before midnight. Of course, that was never going to happen, because the fireworks were scheduled at 2400. My friends were not the ones you usually see talking nicely and chatting to random people. They were rude, disrespectful, and kind of searching for problems. Well, with that being said, it was no surprise that we found what we were looking for. After the fireworks came to an end, we decided to go home. We all live in the same block, so we are all chatting and going home. We were walking and chatting random things when suddenly we realized one friend of ours who was with us all the time was missing. We decided to call him and he replied. It was dead silent in the background, and the voice from the phone told us, "I'm at home, getting ready to sleep. Catch you tomorrow." I wasn't the one talking to him, my other friend was, but when he heard those words, his face turned red really fast. He recognized that the voice from the phone that he had just heard was not the voice of our friend. Maybe he was lying and he stayed up at the concert, but first of all, there was no point for him to do that, and second, as I told before, the background was dead silent. We decided to go to his apartment and tell his parents what just happened. So we walked toward the house he lives in, and we start to hear some guys talking really silently, and continuously trying to light up a lighter. Just as we cross the side of the house, we see like 6 or 7 guys holding our friend, mouth all taped up and on his knees, trying to light his jacket. We start to shout at them from some distance, so the people living around can see what's happening. Until one of the guys pulls out a knife and starts running towards us. We all start to run as fast as we could in different directions. And that must have been the biggest mistake we made. He was going right after me, and I felt that he is gaining on me really, really fast. I knew that if he catches me, nothing good is going to happen, so I tried to run someplace where I can run into some other people. Suddenly, I felt a hand pulling my jacket, and I fell down really hard. My hands were bleeding, but I did not feel that at the moment. He hit me with the knife when he caught me. As I was on my back, looking right in his eyes, he said something like, "So boy, from my home address, want to say your goodbyes." And right after he said that, my friend, the one we found missing, slammed him to the back with a huge metal pipe. The guy fell, quickly got to his feet, and ran away, without any words coming from our mouths. We looked with our friend to each other and ran separate ways to our homes. I know it might have been a really bad idea, but that was just from pure instinct. Next day, I met with my friends in the yard where we used to play basketball and talked about everything that happened last night. As it appears, my friend, who was surrounded by other guys, had his arms behind his back with his pockets full of quite powerful explosives, which are being used at the New Year's Eve. So the guy we have faced was trying to ignite it, and others held him so he couldn't move and take them out of his pockets. It might have been the thing to forget after those years, but the fact that I was looking into his eyes and he told me my own home address with a demonic smile on his face every time gives me chills just trying to think about it. Luckily, nothing happened after that. And I sure as hell hope that we will never ever meet again, guys, with explosives. I've never been afraid of taking the bus, but after this encounter I'm freaked out. I'm a 15-year-old female from Iceland, 5'1", and people often mistake me for a 12-year-old. Let me explain the Icelandic bus system. It's very convenient, and you only have to pay a small amount of money to get literally everywhere in the city. But with Iceland only having around 300,000 people living in it, it can be hard to find people to work as bus drivers, so they basically let anyone get the job, if they have a driver's license. So with that being said, I'll begin my story, which happened on a Friday, April the 15th, 2016. Me and my friend had decided to meet our other friend and have dinner at her place, and then go to the movies. I'll call my friend that invited us to dinner Ada, and my friend that went with me, Ellen. Me and Ellen met up at her place and got ready. Shortly after that, we went to the bus stop. The bus arrived 5 minutes later and we got in. Ellen asked the bus driver, who was around 50 years old, if the ride was 250 kronas. The bus driver seemed to get pissed off and said it was 210 kronas. He even added, "You're not 18 yet, right?" We figured that it was more expensive for 18 plus, so me and Ellen shrugged it off and took our seats. We were the only people in the bus, which isn't that strange since this has happened to us before. The bus driver went out to have a smoke, and got back in the driver's seat and started driving. It didn't concern us at first that he was going in a complete different direction to where he was supposed to be headed. We figured he was just turning around, but he kept going to a direction that was heading out of the city, and he did not stop on any of the bus stops. I got worried, and I asked Ellen if we should go ask him if he goes downtown. Ellen has always been very shy, so I went alone to ask. I asked him, very politely, "Are you heading downtown?" He didn't even look at me, probably concentrated on the road, and said, "No, I'm going home." He checked his rearview mirror and glanced at my friend. He continued, "Aren't you girls the only one in the bus?" I stupidly said yes. He kept on repeating that he was going home, and I was in complete shock, so I just said, "Okay, I was just asking if you were going downtown," and I returned to my seat. I told Ellen what had happened, and not exaggerating, we both shit ourselves with fear. We didn't know what to do and just held each other's hand tightly. We thought we were going to be kidnapped or get raped by this insane bus driver. Calling the police never came up to our minds since we were both in shock. I was already planning to jump out the window when he suddenly turned around back to the city. He opened the door and let us out at a bus stop in the outskirts of the city. Me and Ellen ran out of the fucking door as fast as we could, and I just had a complete breakdown. I was so scared. We called Ada and told her everything. We were already 40 minutes late and she was worried sick. In the end, we got to our friend's house safe and sound by taking another bus with people in it. I don't know why the bus driver acted like that, and I wonder why he changed his mind and turned around. Was he pulling a joke on us? I've already let out a complaint to the bus company, but I haven't got a reply. This may not be scary to some, but the feeling of fear I was feeling sitting in that bus alone with my friend and a psycho bus driver was overwhelming. Definitely not taking the bus again anytime soon. So Icelandic bus driver, let's not meet again. This happened last year, sometime before Thanksgiving. I work at Target, and as you can imagine, it was busy around this time, which meant I was getting a good amount of hours. The only downside to this was I didn't always have a reliable way to get to work. I had no car, my friends were few, and the few I could call, they often had work around the same time I did, so my modes of transportation were walking and taking the bus. Walking to work was somewhat a trek, but I didn't mind it. This particular day, I had to go to work. It completely slipped my mind to check the new bus schedules. The city had recently rerouted them, and it didn't dawn on me to check until a good hour and a half before my shift started. I checked online. The site was down. Well, maybe their texting service worked. This usually let me know what time the next bus was coming, at least, and what route to take. I texted the number, but no answer. Walking it is. I started my journey to Target, and I had this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I shook it off. It was the early morning after all, and I'm not much of a morning person. Anyway, I continued on walking, listening to music, with one headphone in, when suddenly I heard much heavier steps behind me. They were keeping rhythm with me, and I immediately turned around and looked right at who was following me. It was a somewhat short Hispanic male, probably around 24, built. He had a grey shirt on and some big blue headphones. At this point, we had made eye contact and wrote it off, as he was just trying to pass me. With my eyes back forward, I slowed my pace as to let him pass. He didn't. Instead, his pace slowed too. I quickened my pace to see if he would too, and lo, he did. At this point, I began to panic inside, and I'm thinking of what I have on me that could be used as a weapon. I look at the street sign, and I'm barely making it to the halfway point. Suddenly, I hear these loud footsteps. It sounds like something was charging at me. I turned for a moment to look behind me, and it was him. He was running right towards me. There was no business open till another block, so in my haste, I walked into the street thinking I could flag someone down, or if it came right to it, I'd rather get run over than have him catch me. He sees this and slows his pace down to mine. "What time is it?" he asks as he's trying to get as close as he can to me without being in the street. "What?" I asked with an incredulous expression. I noticed his headphones were connected to something in his pocket, and in this day and age, it was very unlikely that it wasn't a phone or an iPod. "What time is it?" he asks again in the most innocent voice he can pull off. I take out my phone with my eyes glued to him and glanced at it very quickly and told him the time. "I'm sorry, I can't hear you." He laughed. "Can you say it again or come closer?" It was then that I noticed that we finally made it to the only business that was open, and I booked it across the street. I could hear his frustrated cry as he followed behind. I ran in and immediately announced I was being followed, to which the employees locked the doors. They asked me what he looked like, and they sent their only male to go out and look after a few minutes. That creep was waiting for me in the parking lot behind this business. I had to call in my work and let them know what was going on, and that I would be late. Then I had to arrange for a friend to come pick me up. I was at least an hour late. When my friend finally picked me up, I was horrified to see him still waiting in the parking lot for me. So a creepy guy with the headphones, let's not meet again. This story begins with me working as a day camp counselor. Things were going really well. The children loved me, the other counselors were fond of me, and I had a blast pretty much every day of the week. Plus, I was making good money. One day, there was a new counselor, however. We'll call him Nick. For starters, Nick looked a bit off, and he also seemed very familiar. Maybe he was a fellow patient of my orthodontist. I wasn't sure where I knew him from, if at all, but there was something strange about him I could tell. I shrugged the notion off and continued working on my merry way, until one day he approached me and extended a hairy arm. "Hey there, name's Nick. Pleased to meet you." I neglectfully shook his hand and grimaced a bit, but of course, at the time, I certainly hope he hadn't noticed. "You too, anything I can do for you?" "I'm new here and I was hoping you could show me the ropes," Nick said. "Yeah, sure." So for the rest of the day, I served as Nick's personal tour guide, and we just hung out and talked. He was incredibly talkative and could not keep his mouth shut. It was as if the silence scared him. I quickly grew annoyed with him and couldn't wait to go home that day. Well, I was in for a nice surprise because when the end of the day finally came, Nick suggested we hang out. I was fairly creeped out by Nick at this point and declined his invitation in a friendly manner by telling him I had soccer practice to get to. Oh well, how about I come and watch you play, and then we can grab a bite to eat? He proposed. Sorry, Nick, today really just isn't good for me. I have to eat dinner out tonight for my grandpa's birthday, I said. Nick looked a bit disturbed, and I could practically see the pits of his eyes grow deeper. How about I call up my family, and we all eat together at Tony's kitchen? Clearly Nick was set on hanging out with me, and I became increasingly freaked out. Look, Nick, I appreciate your offers, but like I said, today simply isn't gonna work out. Maybe another day, huh? I said. Oh, come on. I had such big plans for us, Nick said. Another day, man, I replied. Nick finally gave up for the moment being, and I finally got to go home. I went into my living room, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the TV, and fell asleep for a bit. I woke up to a knocking at the door and figured it was probably my sister coming home from her friend's house. I got up and opened the door, and my jaw dropped at what I saw. Nick was just standing there with a creepy grin on his face and said, "Hey there, buddy. How was soccer?" I couldn't believe my eyes. How the hell did he know where I lived, and why was he here? I said, "Nick, I thought I told you we could hang out another day. I have to get going to dinner soon. You should really go." Nick clearly wasn't picking up on my verbal cues because he then said, "Don't worry. I already called my mom and she said I can come with you." I replied, "Nick, I don't think you understand. You're not allowed to come. Honestly, you're creeping me out a bit, man. Like, we just met." Again, Nick's dark eyes stared into my soul as he slowly turned around and walked away. After I got home from dinner, my mom asked me to go outside and grab the mail. I ran down the stairs and out to the mailbox and swear I could feel something watching me. Psst, I heard. I looked to my left. Nothing. Psst, I heard again. I looked to my right. Nothing. Psst, not over there either, silly. Followed by creepy laughter. I looked up, and I literally have never been more scared in my life at what I saw. Nick was sitting in a tree, just staring down at me, like a demonic angel, laughing like a maniac. I screamed and ran back inside and told my parents everything that had happened. Nick didn't show up to camp ever again. But a few days ago, I did receive a friend request from him on Facebook. Needless to say, I'm not accepting that shit. So Nick, I hope to never meet you again in the future. A couple of years back, when I was around the age of 13 to 14, the latest craze among the users of the internet was that of Slender Man. The game that got made into horror movies, creepypastas and such. Well, I, as many others, I stumbled upon this, and it scared me shitless the first time someone showed it to me. But I would never go out of my way to do what these guys did. As a bit of background information, I can tell you that I live in an area that's extremely quiet, but probably also the area of my country with the most crazy murders. Just last year, we had several family murders in our sparsely populated city area. At the same time as this craze was upon us, I was a very good gymnast and was mostly into what's called tumbling. However, when you get better at sports, you usually end up training by the end of the day. And as luck would have it, I ended up training with my mates from 8 to 10 in the evening. As a younger teen, with parents out of the house, I would have to bike home from every training session, which wouldn't be as annoying if it wasn't winter in a country where the sun sets at 2 to 3 in the afternoon. And you had a good 10-minute sprint on bike through unlit forests. As you might expect, I never met anyone, and the dark never really bothered me, but this was the same week as my asshole friends would talk about this new urban legend, creepypasta. This particular evening, I am biking home, really going at it since I just want to get home, shower and go to sleep. I am biking down the forest paths that I was so familiar with, going at a pace that would severely hurt me if I hit a large branch and I fell off. Yet I know these woods and paths like my own back pockets, and had been jogging and biking alone here for as long as I could remember. You could probably imagine how weird it was to be biking through these woods where no one really went this time of day, when suddenly I have two very bright flashlights shining at me. This happened in a split second, and I rather quickly get to where the flashlights are shining. While on my bike, I hear one yell something along the lines of, "It's him! It's Slender!" and the other commanding a dog, "Go get him!" First confusion, then horror. Then amusement. Then back to horror mixed with, oh God, what I would give to be in my own warm bed right now. I don't actually remember how long it took to get away from there, but I sure as hell wasn't going to stay around a bunch of crazy guys out hunting ghosts, or whatever the hell they were doing. I ride as fast as I can through the pitch darkness, where I am now able to see absolutely nothing, because these morons had just shone a very bright flashlight directly into my eyes. Eventually I get to the edge of the forest, and this dog had been following me for at least half of the way. The dog might have been friendly or non-aggressive, but you know what they say. The dog mirrors the owner, and if the owners were douchebags like these, then I wasn't going to take my chances with this larger dog. 2 minutes later, I have hauled my ass into our driveway, and I head to the shower and then directly to bed. I've never heard of these guys again, and I didn't really do anything about it. However, I think I told my parents a year or so later, and they were very adamant that I had made up the entire thing. In hindsight, I should probably have at least told my parents the day it happened, since my friends had also met very crazy people in the same woods before. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I were on foot that particular night, and I'm pretty sure that I took the 20-minute longer route around the forest the next couple nights. So crazy ghost hunters, guys who want to scare people absolutely shitless during the night, let's not meet again. So this happened to me outside of school, around 2 years ago. It was 4 p.m. after school hours, as my friend, hereafter Marie, and I decided to stay behind and practice piano. We decided it was time for us to head back to my house and headed out of the gate. We were almost at the gate that leads us out of the school grounds when a man shouted to us, "Hey, could you help me please? My car is broken down." Now, no one was around as it's way after school hours, and the staff were still inside packing away or working. I can't remember his facial features too well, but he had dark skin and black hair with some scruffy stubble and a mustache. He looked like a normal, everyday man. He had next to him a silver family car and had his door open. Marie tried to pull me away after I had frozen in my spot, rooted to the ground. I was well aware of strangers and what could happen if you encounter the wrong person. But I have a sort of kind nature, and wondered if this man really needed help. Again, Marie tried to pull me away, and I could understand that. She had a similar experience where her sister was almost kidnapped, so knew not to trust strangers by cars. I remember her saying to me, "Don't trust him, whether he needs help or not. It's not worth taking the risk." By now the man was pretty much begging for us to help him, saying he had a child, which was understandable as this was the nursery car park, and that he needed to get home. My kind nature had me take a couple of steps towards the man, despite the fact that I was a shaking mess. I could hardly breathe and couldn't calm myself down. I'd never felt more terrified. But I still stepped forward, so unsure of what to do. The feelings that I had inside still confused me. I was basically having an internal war with myself. I was shaken to the core, yet I wanted to help the man. Eventually, I was so weak to my knees that just a simple tug from my friend sent me out the gate. We stopped for a minute, Marie hugging me and reassuring me. I don't know why I was so frightened. Then I looked up and saw the silver family car driving away. That sent me into fits of sobs and shakes. We both walked home, phones at the ready to call the police if anything happened, but still shaking with the thought that we were almost kidnapped. The thing that makes everything so much worse, however, is that a student from the year above me claimed to have been almost kidnapped by a man of the same description, dark skin and black hair, scruffy stubble and mustache. However, not the same car. Could it have been the same man? The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't Marie with me still scares me. What if I had walked up to the man? What if he just ran at me while I was rooted to the spot? I didn't report this to the police or to the school, like the other student did. It didn't help as they never found him, just from the fact that it scared me, and that at the time, I didn't want to talk about it. I've only just told my parents and they claimed I should have. I wish I did. So creepy guy with the silver family car. Let's not meet ever again. I live in a fairly safe city, so not a lot happens except to me. I am mixed with black and white with blue-green eyes. I had always looked older than what I was as a teen and had the body of a grown woman, big boobs and butt. Needless to say, I attract the wrong kind of attention sometimes. There are many stories that I could put about me having been followed by a guy to get me in his car, or exposing themselves to me. There are two instances that have truly scared me. The first one, I was about 16 at the time, and this was when cell phones were not as abundant as they are now. We all had pagers. I was walking home from the store or something by myself, and I got to the corner waiting for the light to change, when I see this grey car making a left-hand turn. As he got closer to where I was, I noticed two people in the car that looked weird. I looked closer and realized that the woman in front had tape on her mouth, and so did the guy in the back. In fact, as they went by, he lifted his hands to show that they were tied up. I rushed home as quickly as I could, but it still took a half hour. I called the police, but I know there was not much that they could do since how much time had passed, and I had not seen the license plate number. The second one that scared me was when I was like 18, and I was still living in the same city. We lived up the street from 7-Eleven. It was not like even a 10-minute walk. I was living with my mom, her boyfriend, my sister, and my boyfriend at the time. I was coming home, and I hear someone talking. Again, no cell phones. I looked back and saw this black guy in a green car telling me to get in his car. Thank God he was going in the opposite direction of me. I told him no and ran the rest of the way home. My boyfriend and my mom's boyfriend were outside talking. When they saw me run up and asked what happened, I told them, but they just laughed at me. Fine, whatever. I go in the house. Not 2 seconds later, they were calling me back outside and asked if it was a green car. I was like, yes, and looked in the alley, and there he was. They had seen him drive up slowly and come back when he saw me. He had sped out of the alley and came around to the street where we were at and pulled up to the sidewalk. My boyfriend and my mom's boyfriend walked to the car, and my mom's boyfriend had a machete on him and pulled it out as they were walking. I guess the guy saw it and took off. I also still to this day wonder what happened to the kidnapped couple. This is from the perspective of a female. So I'm a runner, and I live in a very safe neighborhood. I run about 5 times a week and go through my usual routine of walking down my street, taking a right, walking about 1,000 feet more, then taking a left and starting to run on a stretch of wide main road. On one of these days, as I was following my usual routine, I was running on the stretch of the main road when I saw a grey van approach me. As it slowed down considerably. To give a little more background information, I'm a teen and about 5'3¼ and petite. I listen to a lot of scary stories on YouTube and have known to be more aware. He started slowing down and I stopped and turned to face him. He was wearing shades, a very dark green jacket, and his hair was a mess. He looked unkempt and didn't seem like a fit fellow. I started getting nervous as he rolled down his window, and in my nervous state, looked around, only to find we were alone. There was no one else driving, walking, running, or doing anything similar. I was alone on this long stretch of a road with absolutely no one on either side. He didn't speak, and he suddenly sped off. I felt relief wash over me and started running again. About 30 seconds into it, I noticed the same grey van returning, and panic came back once again. The guy had taken a U-turn and was coming back towards me. Same shades, same dark green jacket, same messy hair and unkempt look. But this time he was much, much closer to me, as his side was facing me. He slowed down once again, but this time, I picked up my pace and continued to run fast. It was obviously easy enough for him to keep up with me, and I eventually got tired and had to walk. At this point I was scared because there was still no sign of another soul. And when I turned to him, he was nodding his head and grinning this creepy grin. His teeth were surprisingly clean compared to the rest of the man's appearance. I felt a huge rush of panic and anxiety rush over me when I heard a low, deep, dark voice say, "Hey, baby, what are you up to?" Trying not to let him know I was scared, I simply said, "Please leave me alone," and began running again. He floored the pedal and caught up with me. My shoelace untied, and I had to, unfortunately, sit down and tie it. When he stopped and said, "You're really pretty. Get in my van. I'll show you something." I was horrified and just said, "No thank you, please leave me alone. My answer is no." He was not happy to hear that. I saw his face turn red and his expression turn to anger. "Get in the van, you bitch." I stopped, turned around, and ran my ass out the other direction with tears flooding my eyes. Just when I thought I had lost him, I heard him shout, "You bitch, get the fuck into my van." I was so afraid he had a gun that I turned and said, "I'm fine the way I am. Please leave me alone." Trying my hardest to not let my fear be heard in my quivery voice. I felt intense panic when I heard this. "Yeah, you're going to be fine soon." Adrenaline levels shot up, and my fight or flight response kicked into full gear. I ran faster than I thought I could have and turned abruptly. He somehow turned as well, and I thought I was going to die when he shouted, "Get the fuck into my van now, you bitch, or I'll do something I'll regret." I decided to ignore him, but my heart was already up in my throat from fear, and continued running faster than I imagined. When he came back, he shouted, "Fuck you, you bitch. I'll find someone else." Relieved he went away, I ran back home in tears. I just hope he hasn't done anything else. I was too scared to report it to the police, and I regret that now. I was 11 and on a school trip to Paris. We got to go to the Eiffel Tower, and the teachers pretty much let us roam around by ourselves. I had the impression that the Eiffel Tower was full of stores and restaurants and lights and was gorgeous. That wasn't really the case. My friends and I went to the first floor, and there was nothing but a closed butcher's shop and some museum. I also remembered the stairs to the second floor with no handrails. It looked dead and creepy. It was also getting dark. After trailing around the museum part, which wasn't too bad, my friends and I were just walking along. We seemed to be the only ones around. As we were walking, I heard a meow and wondered what on earth a cat was doing up here. When I heard the meow again, I looked behind me and saw a man. His features were distorted. It was like his eyes and mouth were folded in, making lines on his face. He was dressed as a butcher. As I was looking at him, he smiled and meowed again. My friends also saw this and realized it was him doing the meowing. We sped up our walking speed a bit. Looking back, the guy was now holding a butcher's knife and meowed again and started walking towards us. We started jogging, and every time he meowed, we just ran faster. We ran around a corner, and my friend, who was afraid of heights, accidentally looked down and freaked out. A tall guy who claimed he was the manager asked if we were okay, and if my friend wanted to have a seat. He gestured to a chair, inside a tall glass box, with a padlock on the outside of the door. His grin was so creepy, and he was just standing there and still gesturing, waiting for my friend to take a seat. She declined and we hurried off to the elevator to find our teacher. As we were heading back, we see the meowing guy coming from the other side of the closed butcher's, dragging a giant trash bag. He stops when he hears us, looks at us, and meows. Almost peeing ourselves, we ran straight to that elevator. To be honest, I'm still not sure what actually happened that day. Though speaking with my friends, we all remember that day very clearly. 10 years later, my friend who is afraid of heights went back there with another friend. She told me we weren't making it up. The glass box with the chair inside and the padlock on the outside really was there. She didn't see the meowing man or the manager again because they hurried to the third floor and didn't stick around. About 3 weeks ago, I had just moved out of the house fully, after living between my parents' house and my new house for about a year. I sold wood carvings in town to make a decent amount of money, and bought the place about a year and a half ago. I lived in a small cabin in a remote area outside of my town's limits. The nearest person, as far as I know, is about 20 miles away. So I'm walking my dogs along a trail, and it's still pretty bright out, about 7:30 or so. I get a bad feeling about the situation, so I start to jog. This isn't unusual. I have minor paranoia and anxiety, and occasionally feel utter dread for no real reason at all. Not debilitating, but enough to not think of this as necessarily off. So I'm jogging with my 2 very small dogs down this trail. I am nearing a bend in the trail, going along a steep bank on my left and a creek on my right. I turn around the bend and I see this older man staring at me. He has a black coat on that reaches his knees, and stringy black hair, laying slicked on his scalp. I immediately froze. No, it wasn't unusual that people would be out here in the evening, or even into the night. A state park envelops my land and the road into it. Sometimes I see the more adventurous hikers making up the steep hills that lie between the state trails and the trails made by the family who owned this land before me. Usually they just apologize and use my phone to call someone to pick them up, or just head back down into the valley and into the park. But something bothered me. Maybe the fact that it was mid-April and the temp was well into the high 70s, but this man wore a thick coat. We are only 10 to 20 feet apart, close enough that I could see his eyes. They were mismatched, green and brown, almost black. He begins to hum something that resembles a chant of sorts. And repeating from there. His voice was raspy and throaty. I was frozen by fear. My dogs began barking and that snapped me out of it. I began to back away, but as soon as I start to backpedal, the man moves forward in a violent and jerky way. Just thinking about it makes me shiver. The man was moving as if he was being controlled by a marionette. With his movements very sharp and fast, I turned, screamed, and booked it. I ran and didn't look back. I ran all the way back to my truck, hopped in it, and left for town. I don't know how to comprehend what happened. I've never been more scared in my life, and I plan to return to that cabin after collecting myself. so I hope to God I never meet that guy again. Okay, so this all happened in mid-2014, when I was 15. On Sunday mornings, I had the house to myself. So, like any teenager, I relished being home alone. I would always sit in my living room, drinking a cup of coffee and watching TV. In the living room, there are 2 windows that face the street I live on. You can kind of see into my living room if you try hard enough because the curtains covering the windows are white and kind of thin. So one Sunday morning, I'm in the midst of my Sunday morning routine, when all of a sudden I hear this loud, persistent banging on my front door. I was pretty confused as to why whoever was at the door wouldn't use our doorbell, seeing as it was right there. I didn't answer the door because I was always taught never to do so if I was home alone. I also had a really bad gut feeling, so I muted the TV, got away from the living room window, and pretended like I wasn't there. I couldn't check to see who it was without giving away that I was home because of the layout of my house. Our living room is right next to the foyer of our house, but the front door is see-through, so whoever was there would see me. Whoever was banging on the door kept on doing so for a solid 5 minutes, and then abruptly stopped. They walked away from my house and down my street, and I was finally able to get a glimpse at what they looked like. It was this short, stocky guy, wearing a white wife beater and saggy pants. I had never seen him before, which was unusual because you usually only saw people who lived in the neighborhood walking around. It looked a bit off. I can't really explain it, but my gut feeling was that something was wrong with this guy. Since I saw the guy walking off towards my neighbor's house, I figured that maybe he was just trying to sell me something. But instead of approaching my neighbor's front door, the guy passed it. He then passed all of my neighbor's houses that I could see and continued walking on the road, not going up to any others. I sighed a breath of relief, thinking that maybe it was all just some huge misunderstanding. I then relaxed and went back into my Sunday morning routine. About 20 minutes later, I hear the guy banging on the door again. This time I was paralyzed by fear and decided to just hide in the corner and hope that he would leave. Like the first time, he persistently banged on the front door for about 5 minutes before leaving. I looked out the window, and it was the same guy. By this time I was pretty freaked out, and my recurring visitor caused me to cut my morning routine short and retreat back to my bedroom. I was pretty scared and expecting the guy to come back again, so I had 911 on speed dial just in case things took a turn for the worse. Like I had previously anticipated, the guy came back after another 20 or so minutes, banging on my door, which pushed me to breaking point. At this point, I was pretty freaked out and called my mother and tell her about the situation. She came home immediately. The guy stopped coming back to my house, and I promptly felt better about the situation and thought that maybe I had overreacted. But I was still on edge nevertheless. The following Sunday, the guy was back. But I wasn't home alone this time. My mom and I were the only ones there, and neither of us were particularly fond of the idea of answering the door. There was just something that told us not to answer it, so we just ignored the guy banging on the door. This persisted for a month or two. Every Sunday from around 9 to 11, the guy would come around, banging on my door. Then it abruptly stopped and I never saw the guy again. I have no idea who this guy was or what he wanted. I don't really know if I want to know. All I know is that my gut was telling me not to open that door. To this day, even hearing someone ring the doorbell or bang on the door causes me to feel a wave of paranoia and act cautiously. So I used to work at a public library. I absolutely loved my job and all the interesting people who came through. As with any job in the public though, you do occasionally get some creeps. One night I was working at close with one other co-worker, and this older gentleman comes in. He's probably pushing 60, skinny, with stringy hair. He had come from one of our other locations. We were open later than other branches to use the computer. I set him up on one, and within minutes, he was at the desk asking to exchange the headphones he purchased earlier that day. I obliged without thinking anything of it. As I handed them to him, he grabbed my hand to introduce himself. He told me his name and told me how beautiful he thought I was and that he'd love to take me out and show me a good time. Mind you, I'm 25 at the time. I politely decline, and he storms back to his computer till closing time. Whereupon, leaving at close, he mumbles some very choice words under his breath. The next day I was working again, but setting up for a program in the conference room. One of my good friends who I worked with came running in and told me some old dude came barreling through the library, mumbling about the girl with the dark hair. She came to warn me, but luckily I was heading out for the night. She called me after I had gotten home to inform me that some dude, turned out to be Creepface, called and asked if and when I was working again. At this point I was becoming legitimately concerned and contacted my supervisor about how to handle this. She told me to contact security and to do what I felt was best. The next day I was at work, I was on edge constantly. I had my husband on standby, and a good friend of mine who happened to be off that day to hang around the library for the last leg of my shift. And lo and behold, Creepface is making a beeline for me. I run to the back office, locked with a security code, to hide. He followed me the whole way, then waited outside the door, preventing me from coming back out front for almost an hour. The maintenance guy comes to the back to check on me, where I started hyperventilating when I heard someone touch the door. I told him the scenario, and he told the dude off and never to come back. I had a friend and family follow me home for weeks to be safe, and I always took a different route home. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life. So, creepy old dude, let's not meet again. I live in a small village with 2 large cities on each side. We have 2 large grocery stores, and sometimes people from the cities come to shop here, since it is quieter. There is a lot of social interaction, so usually we know who comes from the cities and who actually lives here. A few weeks ago, I, 30-year-old woman, was doing some grocery shopping. I greeted some people, found the things I needed, and helped a young girl aged 6 or so with grabbing tea from a high shelf. I thought I recognized her to be the kid of an old schoolmate, but didn't ask her or really say more than, "Here you are." She sent me a large smile back, and I thought that she looked really adorable. I was nearly done when I saw the girl again. She was standing hand in hand with a man, and I thought he might be her father. And when she looked at me, I sent her a smile. It was very clear that he wasn't in fact her father when she yelled out, "Mom!" ripped her hand away from him, and ran at me only to wrap her arms around me. I was startled for a moment, but then wrapped my arms around her and glared at the man. I demanded to know who he was, but he turned around and quickly stalked off to another aisle. I wanted to go after him, but that was kinda hard with a kid hanging off my waist. A kid who now was weeping. I'm no good with kids, but I tried to comfort her, and figured I should go to the cash registers and ask if someone could call for her mom when she arrived. She was indeed my old schoolmate. When the girl finally had calmed down, the man was long gone, but she told us that he had complimented her hair and wanted to take her to the Italian ice cream parlor, which was 2 streets over. He had grabbed her by the wrist, not her hand like I had thought at first, and she actually had bruises. We reported it to the management of the store. I could actually give him a good description of the man and gave our contact info. He said he would check the security footage too, and also send the info to the police. I haven't been contacted about it, but the cashier told me last time that they actively keep an eye open for that guy. Update. Had a play date, and her mom told me that she had recently divorced the father. Father tried to kidnap the daughter from school once before, so she has set up all these safety rules with her daughter. This was one of them. We hit it off really well, my old schoolmate, her daughter and me. So now I'm her official sitter. Since there was only her and her own mother who could pick her daughter up from school, I have now also been added to the list of people who can pick her up from school, which is nice, because I just recently lost my job and have all the time in the world, while my schoolmate is struggling with her full-time job. She suspects that the man who tried to take her daughter was a friend of her father, or hired by him. She told the police about the suspicion, and it was added to his file. I use Tinder pretty frequently, and it's usually cool. Just meeting people, chilling, smoking with most of them. So I match with this dude named Charlie, and he seems cool. He's really cute, and he plays music which is really appealing to me, as I also sing and play piano. We talked for a while. I agreed to meet him at his house. Mistake number 1. Why did I think it was a good idea to meet a stranger in their home? I don't drive, so I take an Uber over, and it's a decent way, so it's kinda pricey. When he buzzes me into the apartment complex, I got this creepy vibe, but I shook it off as nerves. I go up to the 3rd floor and he's standing at the door. Things are cool, we're just chilling. We smoked a couple of bowls and we're watching a movie. So he makes a move on me, and I go with it. We end up on the bed and we're obviously engaging in adult activities, when out of nowhere he wraps his hands around my neck. Hard. Now that's all fine and good with me. I mean, I can dig that in the right setting. But alone, in a stranger's house, and he didn't even check to see if it was cool, is not one of those settings. So I literally can't breathe, and I'm fairly certain I'm turning blue at this point, and he is just relentless. Not only is he asphyxiating me, he's now yelling in my face, "Are you scared?" With this wild look in his eyes, and I'm like, "Fuck yes, I'm scared. You're trying to kill me right now." I started to struggle, and he was gripping even harder. I'm not even kidding you guys, I seriously thought I was going to die. By some miracle, I wriggle out of his grasp and start screaming. He's yelling at me to calm down, and I'm frantically trying to put on my clothes. He grabs my wrists as I'm trying to leave, and I use all of my strength to pull away and slam the door. As it was closing, the charming fella bid me adieu with the words, "Fucking cunt." I get home, and I look in the mirror, and I have hella bruises on my neck. I try to cover it up with makeup to no avail. I straight up look like I was almost strangled to death. Then he texts me saying, "I think you need more than one dick." And I'm like, oh, really? You want to bring a friend and kill me together? How lovely. Anyways, I blocked him and reported him on Tinder. I wish I could have done more because I seriously think he would have killed me. I've been debating on going to the police, but the bruises are gone and it's a he said, she said thing. But I'm really starting to wonder if I should because the next girl might not be so lucky. 0 out of 10. Would not attempted murder again. Crazy stranger Tinder dude. Let's not meet. First off, a bit of backstory. I'm a 22-year-old female and I live with my mother in a small village in England. My mom is a Christian priest of 4 rural churches. She often has to visit sick and dying people to offer last rites, spiritual guidance, or sometimes even just company. People in a terminal situation in the benefice will often request to be seen by her, and she is obliged to go and visit them. A couple of months ago, my mom went off to do a visitation. It was pretty much the usual. She'd sit with me for a while, we would chat. She would usually flippantly sigh and say that she was tired and didn't really want to go, and then leave me on the sofa with the dog while she was out. This time was a little different though. Instead of telling me that she was tired and didn't want to go, she looked quite upset and told me that she had a bad feeling about going. She hadn't met the guy before, by the way. She just said she felt like he was going to be weird. Even though I'm a vicar's daughter, I'm not religious and I don't really believe in premonition or things like that, so I brushed it off. I told her not to be silly, and it'd be alright. So with a small forced smile and a gulp, she stood up to leave and kissed me goodbye. When she returned a couple of hours later, she was visibly pale and looking a little shaken. So I immediately rose to a sitting position and asked her what's up. She began with, "That man scared me. He was horrible." I replied with a small laugh. "I thought he was dying. Why? What did he do?" I thought it was funny because how can a dying person be scary and horrible to a priest? I was also confused because he had specifically requested she go visit him. She told me that when she had gone into the hospice, she had been met with the typical image of a frail old man, unshaven and hair greasy and long, looking incredibly weak. The conversation had started fairly normally. However, she said he came across a bit like a misogynistic and belligerent old man. She comes across a lot of these types because in the church it is fairly new to be able to be a female priest. So this attitude is nothing new to her. But in her mind, confirmed fears that this was going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. He began insulting her a little bit in the conversation, insinuating that she had misunderstood him over petty things, and getting very cross about that. Then he would rudely ask her things like, "Well, aren't you going to pray for me then?" Practically spitting the words out. It's hard to describe exactly what transpired to make her feel uncomfortable. It was just his general lack of respect and demeanor. He would simultaneously be insulting, be extremely needy, asking her to sit closer to the bed and to hold his hand, things like that. All the while, he was wired to many various tubes and machines. My mother noticed that hanging out of the end of the bed was a tube that she recognized as being linked up to him that allowed him to urinate without getting up. Well, they were praying, and suddenly, mid-prayer, he gave her what she described as a look of evil. He then twisted his face into a disgusting grin, exposing his gnarled yellow and brown stained teeth. He gripped her hand even tighter and said in a deep, raspy, hushed voice, never breaking eye contact, "Do you know what I'm going to do right now?" My mother lurched to her feet and turned around to walk out of the room. "Wait, what are you doing?" he said, a look of panic and anger washing over his face. With her insides churning, my mother kept her tone level and said, "I know exactly what you are doing, and I don't think it's appropriate to do that while a female is in the room. Do you?" She then turned to walk out of the room. "Don't go. Come back here, now," he screeched. Well, about as loud as a dying 90-year-old man could muster. My mother said, "Are you done?" And he responded with a small, "Yes." So she came back in, and he kept being strange for the rest of the visit, trying to make creepy advances, and yet berating her and criticizing her at the same time. She couldn't put her finger on what it quite was about him that had her so worked up, other than the weird piss incident. She said he just made her extremely uncomfortable, and his volatile behavior flipping between being extremely clingy and then totally angry was very unsettling to say the least. When the visit came to an end, he begged my mum not to leave and practically screamed the place down, shouting that she was leaving him to die, and that he would see her in hell. The man was obviously troubled mentally, perhaps partially senile, but his behavior really shook up my mum. And to be honest, when she recounted what had happened, it sent shivers down my spine. As I already said, I don't believe in God or things like that, but when your own mother, who you love, looks into your eyes with tears in her own and tells you that she felt like she encountered a piece of the devil himself, it's pretty unsettling. It took a while to calm her down from this situation, and when he requested another visit a week later, unsurprisingly, she asked the local retired priest to fill in. This story takes place in the beginning of the year. My first year as a freshman in high school, female, 15. First, a little backstory. Flashback to 8th grade, and one of my best friends at the time, Jasmine, was known to date around. It was non-stop. Think of a revolving door. Anyway, we went to school with this weird, to say the least, kid named Jordan. Jordan was always belting random things out in class, to no response, talking loudly, etc. Think awkward silence. Nobody really talked to him. Kids are mean, especially teenagers. Now, I've always been one to be nice to kids that are outcasts because it's hard enough being a teenager with friends. It just so happens that Jasmine, and I'm quoting her in this one, had pity dated him in the past. He weirded her out too. Then there were times when I would be hanging out with Jasmine and he would message me asking if she was okay, and to tell her he said hi, etc. I tried not to engage too much. I specifically remember one night I checked my phone and saw that I had missed a call from Jordan on Facebook Messenger. Curious, I messaged him. "You called?" "Just wanted to see if you would answer." Slightly weirded out, I remember talking about it with my twin brother, who the next day then told Jordan to stay the fuck away from my sister, which he did because I can hardly remember anything else happening after that. Until this year. At the beginning of this semester, we had 2 classes together, newspaper and PE, periods 1 and 2. I would usually walk out of my newspaper class with everyone else, taking my time with putting everything in my backpack. So did Jordan. He would usually follow me, as we had next class together. When he would try to talk to me or say anything, it always made me feel uncomfortable. I just had a weird gut feeling in my stomach, so I kept my replies short, and gave off many body signals that I was not interested in conversing. A few weeks later, I noticed that a friend of mine would talk to Jordan during PE. Later realizing I had math with him, I brought Jordan up. He started laughing. "That kid has issues." "What do you mean?" I asked. Still amused, he said, "He talks about shutting up the school and being a devil worshipper or some shit. I don't even know." Completely not amused, I made sure to steer completely clear of him as much as possible. Soon more weird comments about guns and weapons were made. One day, it was overhearing him talk about shooting himself. The next, it was him commenting to me while looking out the window that he wished he had a shotgun right now, so he could shoot the window, then walk out. One morning I got out of newspaper class, mixing in with the sea of kids scattered throughout the hallways in waves, until I felt 2 firm taps on my shoulder. I turned around. It was Jordan pointing his hand at me in the form of a gun. As soon as I turned around, he fired 2 shots at me with his hand, and blended into the crowd. I stopped walking, grabbed my phone out of my bag and called my mom, who immediately reported it to the school. They told my mom they would take care of it, which they did. Because after PE, my friend told me that he had been taken out of class. I never saw him again. No one has since last semester. I hope he got the help he needs, but I still wonder why it was me he paid attention to. I was nice to him. Would he have actually tried to hurt me? Or gone through with the school shooting? I'd rather not know. So Jordan, let's not meet. My mom had been a drug addict my entire life. When I was younger, she constantly had people coming and going, and it seemed that a majority of the time these people were shady fuckers. What did I expect? I thought I'd share one experience that still bothers me quite a bit. I was about 12 years old at the time. I was sitting on the couch watching Drake and Josh. I think it was, when there came a knock at the door. My mom wasn't home at the time, so I decided to turn off the TV and remain quiet. "Eloise, you home?" It was a man. "I just wanted to drop something off." "Eloise." I stayed quiet. "Eloise, open the damn door. I'm not going to hurt you." At this point, I was scared. Even as a 12-year-old, when someone says they're not going to hurt you, there's generally something they did in the past that would prompt them to reassure someone of that. Right? He started rattling the door handle. "I swear to God, I will break this door down. You've been ignoring my calls, my texts. You cannot run from me." He began pounding and kicking at the door. I ran to the bathroom because it was the only door with a lock, and hid in the bathtub with the curtain down. I decided to take my bath gun. I had not yet outgrown playing with toys during bath time, okay? I put a little water in it, and a little shampoo in it. At that point, I heard what sounded like splitting wood, and then footsteps in my living room. I heard him go from room to room, all the while yelling, "Eloise, you can't ignore me now, you bitch." Finally, he came to the bathroom door and tried the handle. "Oh, so you're in here, huh?" More pounding. He kicked the door in and stood still for a few long moments before ripping open the curtain and peering down at me. He had slicked back black hair with piercing green eyes, a sad attempt at facial hair, black hooded sweatshirt, black jeans, black shoes. He held a brown bag in one of his tattoo-covered hands. "Oh, even better. I've seen you around before. You're Eloise's daughter. So sweet." He kept repeating that, "so sweet." It made my skin crawl. He walked over to the window and locked it before squatting next to me. "You're gonna come with me. How about that? I'll buy you some ice cream." I glared at him, trying my best not to look terrified. "Not much of a talker. Your mother could learn something from you." He reached his hand out and rested it on my shoulder. In one quick motion, I pulled my squirt gun from under my leg and began spraying it in his face. He didn't register it at first, but he quickly began wiping his eyes. "What the fuck is this? What the fuck? What the fuck?" I hurled my body at him, causing him to fall back and hit his head on the toilet. I grabbed the brown paper bag and ran from the bathroom, out into the hallway and down the stairs. I caught my mom on the entrance steps and pulled her the other direction. "What's going on? You're making me drop my things." I remembered a head of lettuce rolling away. "Be free, my lettuce friend." She quickly caught on that something was terribly wrong and ran with me to my aunt's house. After catching my breath, I described the man and what he did. She quickly recognized him as a man named Tony, whom she owed a lot of money to. I realized I was still holding the brown paper bag that the man had and gave it to my mom. She found a gun inside. He had showed up to kill my mother. So this happened a couple of weeks ago. I was hesitant to share it because I feel like it was just in my head, but now I'm rethinking that idea. Sorry for the length. To give a little bit of backstory on my place of work, the building itself consists of a bunch of small one-floor corporate offices. There are probably about 9 or 10 in all, so there are usually a fair amount of people here during the day. On one side, which is where my office is located, There is a small but thick wooded area where if you go to the edge of it, you can see the residential street behind it. Now, in the day it isn't creepy at all, but after 7 o'clock, the creepiness increases because of the lack of activity and streetlights. It looks like a ghost town with the exception of about 6 cars, including mine. I guess this plays a big part in my fear considering I am a 25-year-old, 5'3" female, working until 1 in the morning by herself. One seemingly normal day, I went outside to my car during my break to make my way to the nearest fast food place and realized I forgot my phone sitting on the charger under my desk. I made my way back inside, and while already inside, I noticed a truck pulling up on the far end of the security cameras we have displayed at the front of the building, and thought, that's weird. He was coming to work at 9 p.m. I kind of brushed it off and retrieved my phone. I also stopped for a split second to use the bathroom and talk to my coworker a little. When I left out, I looked around, noticed the car was gone, and figured maybe someone had just stopped by because they forgot to do something and left. I got my food and about 20 minutes later, pulled back into the parking lot, but stayed further down from where my office was located because I still had time to kill. So I noticed the truck parked at the far corner of the lot with no lights on, and again thought it was weird because earlier in the day the truck was heading towards the area where I now sat. I saw his headlights flick on, and he started to drive toward me. I kept my head down on my phone while stealing glances to see where he was going. He pulled up next to me, being so close that if I wanted to get out, I would have to really squeeze myself in between the cars. I began to panic and saw that he opened his car door, turning the light on, allowing me to now see him. I panicked and threw my car in reverse as he started to jog around to my side. I know I shouldn't judge, but this guy was huge. He was dressed in dark clothing, stood about 6'3" or so, and looked like he could easily weigh 350 pounds. All I thought of was how easy it would be for him to knock me out and throw me into his even bigger truck without anyone noticing I was in there. He held his hand up as if to tell me to stop, but I was already hauling ass out of there. The last thing I want to do is to talk to some strange man in a parking lot when it's almost 10 o'clock at night. I looked in my rear view and saw that he was making his way back to his car. I freaked out even more at this point. I wasn't too familiar with the area, only the interstate that led into the offices from the highway. So I decided to hurry up and dip into the residential area, figuring that it would be easier to lose him if he were following me. I did so and kept checking if he followed me, which he didn't. I pulled out my phone after I stopped a couple blocks away and called my mom to ask what I should do. She didn't answer, and my mind went back to the other female at my job, who would be leaving in about 30 minutes. I called her and told her what happened, and she told me that she didn't see anyone and I was probably overreacting because he didn't get a chance to talk and say what he wanted. She did say, however, that when I come back in, to call her, and she will walk me into the building since I was so scared. While I was on the phone with her, I took the street closest to our building and saw that he was still there, just at the other side of the parking lot, waiting behind another car. I agreed, asked her to stay late with me tonight, and just sat there for about 15 minutes trying to rationalize in my head that nothing happened yet, and I was probably overreacting. But I couldn't shake that gut feeling. Eventually, I made my way back, and he was gone to my relief. When I went inside with her, she gave me this horribly produced business card and said he had left it for me. She said he had banged on the door, but she was hesitant to open it because I had already called her and informed her about him. The doors have slam locks and cannot be opened from the outside without a pass. She said she opened it slightly, and he yanked it open from her. Told her he was hired security because kids were breaking bottles in the parking lots, while putting out a business card that he saw her friend, indicating he saw me leave. She said she just took it and told him something along the lines of, "Yeah, she told me you saw her, and you should have a little more manners when dealing with females so late at night." He said he understood, and she waited for him to leave. I was kind of put at ease at this point, but that quickly faded into fear again. The same fear has only grown the more I think of it. Not one time did he see me enter my office or leave, and my car wasn't parked directly in front, so how would he know which one I worked at? It also isn't easy to tell from the outside. You can't see which office is open. All the offices have lobby doors that remain closed, with the light on for security camera purposes. Also, if you really were a security guard, why would you leave within 15 minutes? I haven't seen him since this happened, and my schedule has not changed, so I'm pretty sure I would have run into him again. We informed the boss the next day, and he said he would call the owner of the property and verify that he did in fact hire security. They did, but the company name was completely different from the one left on the business card the guy gave, and they were hired to come on the weekends. This happened in the middle of the week. So although I'm wondering who the hell was that, I'd rather not find out. I remembered something that happened to me when I was 19. I live in New York City, uptown Manhattan, and my neighborhood is decent and nothing too bad happens around here. So as a 5'3" tall female, I feel comfortable walking around at any time of night. Okay, so during the summer, I went out with friends. We watched a few movies, and then late in the afternoon I decided I was done for the day. There's so many movies a person can see. I was walking home when this short man, shorter than me, with blonde hair and green eyes, says hello and waves with a friendly smile. Confused, I ignore him and go on my way. The next day, I'm at the park with my best friend again. The same short man from the day before walks past us and he waves and smiles at me. At this point, I start to think he knows my dad. Everyone knows my dad around these parts. So I wave back, trying not to seem rude, but still confused as to who this man is, and I am trying to place him but can't. A week later, I am buying groceries for a trip to the beach with some family and friends. And this time the short man appears next to me and says hello. I greet him politely because if he does know my dad, he's the type to complain about routines every time he meets with me, and I am not up for lectures. So as I pay for my stuff, he goes on and on about how big I've gotten and how proud he is. Confused, I ask him his name. He smiles and instead of answering says, "It's so beautiful." I panic. He notices and makes a move to grab me. I was faster and managed to move far from him, and I ran straight home. 2 days after that meeting, I am walking with my 16-year-old younger brother, who is 6 feet tall and weighs 240. And the short man again sees me and waves, but doesn't come near me. My younger brother asks me who the guy is. I tell him what's been happening. He looks at me weird when I tell him I think the guy is a friend of our dad. And he then says that no, he isn't. I freak a little bit more because this guy acts like he knows me. I confess to my brother, who says he's going to walk with me for a few days to see if the guy approaches me when he's with me. For 2 weeks, the short man does not approach me whenever I am with my brother. But one Saturday, late afternoon, I am sitting alone on the steps of my building, waiting for my brother and his friends to show up with food and refreshments. The short man walked right by, and I thought, he hasn't seen me, but he had. He starts with his usual smile and greeting, but this time, he starts to lean down like he's going to kiss me. I jump up from my position and look from left to right. No one is nearby, and I feel panicky. He tries to take my hand. I pull them both away, and continues to talk about my looks, and how he says I have grown up nicely while looking at my body. At that moment, I see my brother running. He's on the short man in a second, and he says to the short man in this calm voice, "Move away from her." The short guy looks panicked, and he's looking up at my brother and trying to find a way to escape, but my brother's friends are now surrounding him. Even with bags of food, they look menacing. My brother grabs the short man, and the next words still freak me out. "This is your first and final warning. The next time I see you, I'll kill you." Then he shoved the guy, who was now red in the face and looked near tears. The short guy started running. It was then my brother turned to me, and he pointed to my cell phone, asking me why I hadn't called them or at least the cops. I felt stupid, but to be honest, truth was I panicked and forgot everything other than that panic. So freaky, friendly short man, let's not meet ever again. I used to work in the mall in my town, and had to take the bus, which wasn't too bad. It's generally safe as long as you're not in the SE parts of town on the bus. Nothing weird had ever happened to me while riding, aside from the occasional weirdo trying to talk to me over my headphones. Anyway, on this day it was kind of hot out, so I decided to wear a tank top and my work pants, and just change into my work shirt when I got there. While we're waiting for the bus to leave the transit station, this fairly cute guy gets on and takes a seat behind me. I normally have my music on quite loud, but will turn it down if people sit next to or around me just to be polite. So I turn it down, and I guess he noticed because he tapped me on the shoulder. I pulled out one of my earbuds and turned to see what he wanted. "You turned down your music. I was just jamming out to that Disturbed you were listening to." We talk about music for a little while. I guess he's never met a woman who has a similar taste in music. I have a tattoo on my right shoulder. It's from a video game, Silent Hill, if you're curious. Eventually he stops talking and reaches out to trace my tattoo with his finger. I'd like to say I pulled away and gave him the evil eye, but I froze up and let him touch. He asked me about it, and I told him it was from a video game. He then got up and sat in the vacant seat next to me. I was pretty on edge, but I'm too nice a person to tell him to move. He keeps tracing my tattoo and I just sit there like an idiot. Other people on the bus aren't paying much attention, but I'm sure if they had been, they would have seen the panicked look on my face. He then started telling me how he had a similar tattoo before he moved to the States. I think he said he was from Brazil or something. But immigration had him get it removed. I just kept nodding, hoping the driver would get on soon and we'd start moving. While still tracing my tattoo and making me feel nauseous, he asked about what I do for work, what I do for fun, how long have I lived in town, and then he asked me if I had a boyfriend. I was engaged at the time and told him so. The bus driver got on then and wasted no time getting the bus moving. I relaxed a little, hoping he could get off before me and I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. Nope. He settles in next to me, then puts his arm around me and draws me in close. He asks me about my fiancé again, like what's he like, what does he do for work, those kinds of questions. I'm trying to inch away from him and make eye contact with anyone else on the bus. I answer him. Then he asks about our sex life. When I don't answer, he takes it as an opportunity to tell me how snorting coke had ruined his sex drive, and he couldn't have erections anymore. But sitting here, with you like this, I'm starting to feel something. He pointed to his crotch at this point, and I could feel my heart in my throat. I called out for the bus driver and everyone looked my way. He scooted the edge of his seat and just smiled. The driver asked if I needed anything and I said I was fine. I kept watching him out of the corner of my eye. He was moving closer again. I was debating in my head if I should get off early and walk or wait for the next bus. Then he leans over me and pulls the cord. It's been fun, babe. He jumped off his seat and swung out the bus. I slumped back and felt sick to my stomach. I called my fiancée crying. I don't work at the mall anymore, so I don't have to take that particular bus anymore. But I do still see him from time to time. I just duck and cover whenever I do. I work in a fairly busy hospital downtown, in the NICU. I usually work at night, and I kid you not, this happened to me less than 5 minutes ago. I figured it would be good to get this down in writing before I forgot. It's also a way for me to have some sort of proof in case something comes of it. During orientation, we are taught to be observant of the signs of a possible abductor. We are taught to look for oversized clothing, bags, and shifty behavior. Luckily, I've never encountered a strange individual. Until just now. It's currently 2:59 a.m., and I've been sitting at the front desk since 11. I'm a nursing student, so I usually just do clerical work around the unit. I also watch the cameras to make sure no one is here that isn't supposed to be here. It's usually pretty quiet at night. However, I've already had a sort of weird night, so this just adds a cherry on top of it. The NICU, and most of the second floor, is a locked unit. This means that in order to gain entrance, you have to pick up a phone, which then rings to the desk. Usually it's parents wanting in to see their babies, and family members who are lost. It quiets down around 11, so no one usually comes in or out during my shift, with the exception of housekeeping. One of the security cameras is situated so I can see who is picking up the first phone. I had been sitting here browsing Reddit when the phone rang. I glanced over at the phone thinking it was a parent wanting an update or something like that. It took me a second to register that it was the number for the first set of doors phone. I picked it up and looked over to the screen. There was a lady in baggy clothing with a sling on her arm. I answered the door and she said she wanted to come in to find her cousin, who apparently had been brought up from the emergency department. I asked for the last name, and she unintelligibly rambled off a Latino name that I only caught the first part of. Knowing that we did not have any new admissions, I told her we didn't have anyone by that name. I tried to get some information out of her, and she again said that her cousin had been brought up from the emergency department. I told her that in that case, she would want to go to labor and delivery and talk to them. She hesitated, and then said okay, and walked away. I got a really weird feeling from her, so I checked the census to see if there was anyone that was being assessed in L&D, and there wasn't. So she either was at the wrong hospital, or she wanted into the unit to do something a little bit more sinister than just see her cousin. I shrugged it off, and figured if her cousin was in L&D that she would find her and all would be well. About 5 minutes later, the same lady appeared in her extremely baggy clothing and her sling. The only difference was that this time, she was putting the sling on, and was using her injured hand to mess with something in her oversized sweatshirt. She picked up the phone and once again asked to be let in to find her cousin, and at L&D said they had no one by that name. I told her the exact same thing, and that she would need to get into contact with her cousin and go back over to L&D. She got hostile for a second, and then hung up the phone. Whether or not she was trying to gain access to the unit for things that she shouldn't be doing, I'll never know. But a creepy lady who looked like a baby snatcher. Let's not ever meet again. November last year, me and my friend decided to drive my car up to Scotland to do some fishing, and eventually make our way to Edinburgh. After the first day of catching some salmon and brown trout, we stored our catches in the cooler box. After contemplating whether to sleep in the car tonight, as we had left it quite late to set up camp, around 4:30ish, the sun was going down. Eventually I said, let's set up a fire and cook the fish. I then drive all the way to Scotland to sleep in the car. My friend agreed. As we set off looking for a spot to camp, we found a little wooded area next to a car park near a farm. We looked into it prior, and apparently you can basically camp anywhere in Scotland as long as you left the place as you found it. So we grabbed all our shit out the car and started setting up our campsite. 20 minutes later, we have a fire going, 2 folded up chairs and 2 tents up. My tent was out of view. For my friends, this will be relevant later. We were glad we chose to camp out instead of sleep in the car. As we smoked a few joints, we reminisced about school life, etc. My friend struggled to keep his eyes open, so I checked my phone, 2 a.m. He called it a night, crawling into his tent and zipping it shut. I sat there with my feet up on my friend's now empty seat, listening to the sounds of the wildlife. I shut off the torch we had hung up on a tree next to us, leaving me in darkness apart from the burning embers of the coal. It must have been 3 or so minutes before I started to hear the crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs that seemed to be coming toward me. Being quite a rational person, I passed it off as a fox drawn to the scraps of food we may have left lying around. I was quickly proven wrong when I heard a sniffle, like someone with a cold clearing their nose. My high quickly turned from chilled out to paranoia, as I feel a heavy dread come over me. My mind raced. Why the fuck is someone out here in the woods at 2 to 3 a.m.? Why are they coming toward me? I slowly reached down to my pocket and felt my heart drop as I didn't feel the smooth blade of my pocket knife. Shit. I must have left it in my tent. All the while I hear the treading coming closer and closer, my heart racing. Out of the darkness, I see a middle-aged man, clean-shaven, parted hair, around 5'10", slowly creeping toward me, almost on all fours like a predator, trying to stay out of sight. I sat there paralyzed, unable to speak. My mouth was that dry I could hardly swallow. That's when I realized he hadn't even seen me. Being under a tree with no light source, I must have blended in. Also, with there only being one tent in view, I guess he thought my friend was the only one camping here. He got closer to the tent and half breathed and half whispered, "Come on, do it," in a raspy voice. Creeped the fuck out and unable to bear the thought of what he'd do next, I said, "Oi, can I help you?" He jumped up in shock and his whole demeanor changed. He looked at me, mumbling awkwardly as he scurried back out of the woods. I sat there still trying to comprehend what happened when I saw the headlights of a car turn on and drive away. I woke my friend and he could tell how shook up I was. So without a full explanation from me, he willingly grabbed all our gear and we slept in the car that night with the doors locked. Most of my extended family lives in Virginia, spread out all over the place, deep in the literal middle of nowhere. As a matter of fact, the first time I visited my aunt's house, apparently I cried because of how long the dirt road was. My mommy will never be able to find me out here. My granny always tells that story when I visit. She gets a crack out of us city folk. This particular incident happened in Farmville. Yes, you read that right. It's not just a Facebook game. It's an actual place. Right in between Tobaccosville and Mechanicsville. Rednecks are creative. I surprised my family for Christmas by flying up to see them. Side note. It was the first and only time all 6 of my granny's grandchildren were in the same room at the same time. Cue the feels. My aunt and I stayed up late, watching old reruns of Mr. Bean. At about 2 a.m., we were going to bed, but Sadie, her pit, needed to go to the bathroom. Of course, but it's only like 12 degrees outside. I left my jacket in the car, which was parked in the garage. I went outside to grab it. The garage is an addition to the house on the side. There is a back door that overlooks the backyard, and lots of trees. My cousin had accidentally driven into, and subsequently broken, the garage door, so it had to be taken down. We're out in the middle of backwoods country land, and there is only a very dim light at the end of the driveway, and a small light on the ceiling. Basically, it's almost pitch black. As I'm opening the door to the car, I can't help but feel as if I'm being watched, and I glance over my shoulder to the door overlooking the yard, and I see a man. It was dark. I couldn't see his face. Hat, hoodie zipped up to his chest. His hands were in his pocket, and it seemed like he was almost peering down. I got a lump in my throat, already freezing. My goosebumps just intensified. I reached into the car, grabbing my jacket, but keeping a visual, slammed the car door, and ran. When I ran back to the door to the house, it must have accidentally locked me out. I turn around, and he's standing at the opposite end of where the garage door would have been. At this point, all that's standing between me and this person is a car, truck, and a couple of bikes. I start screaming bloody murder. At first, my voice wouldn't work. It was clogged up by that lump that welled up in my throat when I saw him. I banged and I banged on the door. I hit the door so hard, I actually ended up busting the door in. My aunt freaked out. She was still sitting in the living room and had only truly heard me when I broke the door. Sadie started to growl, and her hair stood up. My aunt woke up her boyfriend. He ran outside in his boxers with a baseball bat. He did a couple circles around the house, cursing to high heavens. The hooded man was nowhere to be found. Still to this day, I get anxious visiting my family. There are lots of wood and nothingness for someone to get lost in. So wrong turn 2, guy. Let's not meet. When I was little, around 10 or so, I lived out in the country. My neighbors had a farm, and their kids were around the same age as me and my little sister. Between my house and their trailer was a long gravel driveway that led a little deeper into the woods. Being the kids we were, we'd often play around that area, as well as the woods that surrounded our home. That is, until the house at the end of that long driveway became occupied by Bobby. I first met Bobby when his dog wandered into my yard. She was a beautiful Australian Shepherd and loved to play with us. I learned her name was Shelby when Bobby's daughter and wife started frantically yelling for it to come back. The daughter couldn't have been more than 4. She asked me where the dog went, and when I told her it wandered off, she threw a fit. Eventually Bobby came out and found the dog, yanked it up by its collar, and literally dragged it home. As you can already tell, he wasn't the nicest person. As time went on, my parents became aware of our pleasant new neighbor, mostly because of how loud he could be at night. Remember, we're out in the country, and our houses aren't very close together. Bobby was always doing random shit near our house, even after we asked him to stay away from our property. Once, he came up and started mowing our lawn, then pounded on our door and demanded that we pay him. Another time, he threatened to shoot our dog for barking at him. Our dog had already been shot before, and now has 3 legs because of this. He can run pretty damn fast though, and probably scared the hell out of Bobby. He's usually a big sweetie, but has certain triggers that can set him off, and Bobby wouldn't listen when we told him this. We had to keep our dog inside for a while. My dad told me to stay away from him, and obviously I was bummed out because his house was nearby one of my favorite places to play with my friends. Bobby showed signs of meth use, fucked up teeth, aggressiveness, things like that. My dad figured that as long as his kids were safe, Bobby's addiction wasn't his problem. Then one day, I'm playing with some plastic dinosaurs the youngest neighbor kid brought outside. We're sitting in the driveway, not the safest place to be, but our road wasn't exactly busy, when we see Bobby's blue pickup truck speeding down the road. I figured he'd slow down when he came to the driveway, since it's a pretty sharp curve. No such luck. He's racing towards us, and the first thing I thought to do was shove the neighbor boy out of the way. I scrambled out of the driveway just in time. I sat beside the driveway, making sure my neighbor didn't get hurt. I told myself he probably just didn't see us. We'd make sure he saw us next time. But soon there were a lot of old, skeezy-looking cars going back and forth down that driveway. Traffic had gone from maybe 2 cars in 1 hour to a few cars in half an hour. They always came speeding away, not caring what was in the driveway. At one point, Bobby ran over his dog, who thankfully only got a little scraped up. He kicked it for getting in his way. One day I was crossing the driveway. I'd learned my lesson about being there too long, when that blue pickup truck came speeding by again. I screamed and dove out of the way, but this time my dad was there to see it. Now, my dad is a pretty nice guy, but if he even thinks someone is going to hurt one of his daughters, he can turn into one scary fucker. Fuming, he leapt to his feet, storming over to the truck, which had stopped for some reason. Bobby rolled down the window. "What the fuck was that?" my dad asked so very politely. "You need to slow the hell down. There are kids at play here." And Bobby, so intelligent, replied, "I don't give a fuck. I'll run over your kids. I'll run over my own kid." As you can guess, this made my dad furious. He reached up to grab Bobby, who yelped, "Oh shit," before speeding back down to his house. My dad wasn't about to let that go. He stormed down that driveway, yelling at him to get your ass out of that house before I fucking drag you out. When Bobby's mother runs out of the house, she begins pleading with my dad to let it go, that he didn't mean what he said and he'll be more careful. All the while, Bobby is hiding in the house and yelling obscenities at my father. My dad tells her that the next time it happens, he's dragging Bobby out of his car and beating his head against the driveway. He sprints back up to our house to make sure I'm okay, and tells me to let him know if it ever happens again. Not much else happens for a few months. At one point, 2 scantily dressed, obviously underage girls knocked on our door and kept asking for Bobby. My dad told them that they had the wrong address, and I remember them saying things like, "I know he's here and we can give you 2 for 1. After several attempts to get the girls to just go home, my dad threatened to call the cops, and they left. Fast forward 2 months after that, 5 cop cars came speeding down the road, sirens and all. There was a lot of commotion until finally, Bobby came out in handcuffs before being shoved into a cop car. My dad was friends with one of the police officers, who told him that they'd received an anonymous tip that led them to discover a meth lab in the house. I didn't see Bobby after that. A month went by, and I was walking up the road when a woman in a van stopped me. I realized she had Shelby, Bobby's dog, in her back seat. I knew she had 2 other dogs that were always friendly and looked well fed. She asked if I knew whose dog it was because it kept showing up in her yard, and it got along well with her dog, so she wanted to keep it. I lied and told her that it was a stray. I hope he's still locked up. I heard from some of my neighbors that he'd also beat his wife and his daughter along with the dog. So, asshole neighbor that almost killed me, his dog, and a few other kids, let's not meet again.